These are the 10 interview questions. What country does your side of the family come from?
I believe my family came from Russia many years ago.
Okay. Do you personally have a knowledge of the laws in said country?
I don't have a knowledge of many of the laws. I've been to Russia a couple of times, so I know the basic rules, but not a lot of the laws.
So then, where in the U.S. did you grow up?
I grew up in Edison, New Jersey.
Okay. Did you think it was a safer area, like on the safer side, or do you think it was more of a riskier neighborhood?
I
Or
thought
side?
Edison was a safer area at the time. I never really felt unsafe in and around my house.
Okay, just for a time period era, just to know where you fall into this, what was the prominent criminal cases you grew up?
The most prominent criminal case I can remember was when I was just out of college was the O.J. Simpson trial.
Okay, that's a fair answer. Have you witnessed any crimes personally? Were there any major incidents?
I did witness one crime when I was in high school. I worked at the McDonald's in my town, and one night when we were working, we were robbed and held up at gunpoint, and they, stole the money from the McDonald's.
That's a tough story. Any other interesting stories involving that, involving you?
Involving the McDonald's story?
No, just involving any other story where you felt unsafe or any other scenario like that.
No, I don't think there was any others where I felt unsafe, and I don't know that I really felt unsafe until that moment either. That was the first time this McDonald's has been robbed in almost 20 years, so I didn't feel unsafe going into it.
Did you ever find out the reason for why it was robbed? Like, was there ever a specific? Do you think there was a specific motive behind it, or do you think
Yeah, I
it was
think the
just?
motive was to take the money. They stole, I think, about $3,000 or $4,000. They picked a Saturday night, which is when McDonald's was open later and probably was busier, so it had more money in the registers and in the safe. And while they never figured out who stole the money, based on some of the behaviors and some of the things the folks knew, they police believe they either used to work at this McDonald's at one point or may have known somebody who did who gave them some information. But I think it was just to take the money.
Okay. Were there any interesting stories from friends or parents? Any relatives give you any interesting stories as well?
Interesting stories about.
Like some like with them witnessing a crime or having seen something.
No, other than unfortunate car accidents where somebody was speeding or doing something unsafe with the car. I don't know that I can remember any specific yeah, crimes or anything like that.
And then just one more question. Any interesting stories from anybody else? Like not friends, just any other interesting stories that you've heard like recently or anything back from when you grew up as well? Any other?
I mean, I can't remember any stories. I grew up so long ago, so my memory's fading. But recent stories, I work in a professional service providing firm, and I hear stories about financial crimes quite often with former clients and people that either I knew or others knew, involved in embezzling money, stealing money, doing things like that, which are pretty serious crimes. And I hear about that. I wouldn't say often, but certainly more than one incident of those types of crimes.
Then just another thing to add. It was interesting how you mentioned that there was $3,000 to $4,000 that they took from a McDonald's because that was back from a time where credit cards were not as prominent. But do you think that like cyber currency and credit cards and debt in general, do you think it's caused more crime in recent era? Or do you think there was more crime back when there was a more reliance on cash?
It's a good question. I think the type of crime where my McDonald's was robbed, I think with so many people using credit cards now, there's not going to be nearly as much cash in the McDonald's. So the incentive for anybody to rob a place like a McDonald's, I would imagine, would be much lower because there's not as much money. But in my profession and what I hear about with cyber crimes and things like that, I think there's much more crime with people stealing identity and money and things like that due to some of the internet scams and the like, much more, but a different type of crime. I don't think the pure robberies that happened in the past will be as common as there's not as much cash.
So then, just a final question. So do you think it's safer? It's safer in the present era in terms of any crime, or do you think it was safer back in the past, just overall?
I think from crimes involving, injuries and those types of things, I think it's much safer now. I think the society has dealt with a lot of that. So I think even the cities where crimes used to take place, there's less of those. So I think generally that is safer. I think in terms of number and types of crimes, there may be more, but they may be more of the cyber crimes that we've talked about, which involve less sort of harm and injury to people, but financially, I think there's probably more crime.
Okay, and that concludes the interview.